guest with us, and we're going to talk about children during this time. And what about the children? What are we going to do with them? How to make the most of this time with your kids, and we're even going to talk about how basically we're all homeschooling now, aren't we? But anyway, I go ahead and invite your friends. If you're on Facebook, you can start a watch party if you like, or if you're on Instagram, invite some friends. We're also, as you know, on YouTube. And if you'd like to interact with us or to come on and talk with us, go to zoom.us, and you have to enter in a code, and I'll give you that code. And here it is, zoom.us. The code is 947-7941-7271. And then you would enter in Tom Live, capital Tom, capital Live. All right. And so once again, I'm going to say that the code is, the code is again, here we go, 947-7941-7271. And the password is capital Tom, capital Live, Tom Live. Well, you know, I've been thinking about changes, and everybody is saying the world is changing, and we're not going to go back. The new normal is not going to be the old normal. And there's all kinds of wonder about how that will be. Industry's changing. Events will be, just so much is changing. And, you know, you want to be able to adapt to change. Change is not easy for many of us. It's uncomfortable. It's challenging. And as you think about changing in your own life, one of the big areas of change that has occurred is what's going on in our own families, particularly with our children. Obviously, there are people, two-parent working families that have had now, they're home, they're both home, they're having to learn how to cope with one another 24/7, and their children are home from school, and they're supposed to be working at home, and they're supposed to be taking care of their kids, and there's lessons on Zoom, and it's on, and it can be quite challenging. I always look for a silver lining in every trial. And I know that this is difficult for some people, and many people can obviously feel very overwhelmed, but I always look for a silver lining. And I think we always want to be that way. We want to be optimistic. We want to be positive. We want to be encouraging and encouraged. Attitude, I believe, is everything in life. If we maintain the right attitude, we can get through some of life's most difficult situations as an overcomer. But if we don't have the right attitude, situations become overwhelming. We can become terribly discouraged, depressed, and that saps us of our energy. It saps us of our creativity. It keeps us from being able to, situations that come upon us, we sink instead of we overcome in them. And so as we talk about today, I don't want to minimize it. I realize that this is a difficult time for a lot of people. Obviously, if you're a single parent, this is a doubly difficult time. If you are, if you have no idea how to help your kids and what they're learning, a difficult time. If you got to juggle work and the kids in the house, a difficult time. So I realize and understand that, and I don't want to minimize that, but I do want to say that if we approach whatever we approach, we can have the spirit of an overcomer. And God, you know, the scripture promises in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13, no temptation has undertaken you, but such as is common to man. And God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you're able, but with the temptation will provide a way of escape that you may endure it. And so with us, the temptations of losing it, getting angry, blowing up, just the frustration, just the discouragement, just that sense of being so overwhelmed, I can't go on. I want to remind us that God is there. When our strength runs out is when God begins. And we can say that. We want it to be more than just a platitude. We want it to be more than just a saying. we want to really figure out, how do I call upon God for strength during my time of need? And of course, a big, big part of this is just having an attitude of faith, of finding the good, looking for the silver lining, choosing to rejoice, choosing to say, I'm going to base my attitude on God's promises, not my feelings. And of course, these are things we want to do, all of us, whether you're a parent, whoever you are, whatever your age, whatever your stage in life, we all want to be doing that. But I think particularly we want to focus today on with children. And, I was thinking last night as I was about to write my daily email that for years, Roz and I, we home educated our children up until about the middle school years. And we did that. I've often believed, we believed that the education of our children is our responsibility. And we were early homeschoolers, actually. The movement has caught on dramatically. We were kind of early on the curve. We were early adopters, they would call us. But we believed that our children were our stewardship, our responsibility, and that God had given them to us, as opposed to a mentality that it's the responsibility of the government, be it the federal government, state government, or local school board. It's their responsibility to train them, to educate them, to, I'll use this word in a positive way, to indoctrinate them. That simply means to put doctrine into a person, to put beliefs and teachings into a person. We believe that that was our responsibility. And we get this from Scripture, where in Deuteronomy chapter 6, beginning with verse 4, the classic verse for Jewish people, and that God gave to Israel. Verse 4, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might." And so that is like the classic commandment for the Jewish people. It's called the Shema, and it's what they say daily as an announcement of their faith. But then it goes into practically, how do you love God? What do you do? "These words which I'm commanding you today shall be on your heart." That's step one. If you really want to be a loyal, dedicated follower of the Lord God, his word must be on your heart. But he doesn't stop there. "You shall teach them diligently to your sons, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up." And so they should be on your heart, and they should be taught to your children, diligently taught to them. And we saw this as that the teaching, the raising of our children, it was our responsibility. It's not the church's responsibility. The church contributes. Other people contribute. Teachers contribute. Schools can contribute. But it was our responsibility. And the bottom line is the buck stopped with us on the training of our children. Years ago, we were talking about revival in the land. Of course, part of what's gotten me thinking about this is I'm praying for revival in America now. I hope you are too. I know something is up in our country. Something big and significant is happening. And when people say that nothing's going to be the same, everything's going to change, my hope is that we become a more godly, God-fearing, that there's a massive number of people turning to Christ, and that believers will walk with Christ in a deeper way than ever before. I'm hoping for this type of revival in our land. Years ago, when we talked about revival, I remember vividly a conversation I had with some other leaders, and the discussion centered around, can we ever really turn this country around if the education system that almost all the kids are going through is teaching them, is giving them a way of life of secularism, and is teaching them to look at the world and every aspect of the world through the eyes of secularism, as if God is irrelevant. God, if he's there, doesn't matter. This would be the worldview we call secular humanism. And I remember just our conclusion was it'd be really, really hard to see a revival that could last without the youth of America being really learning a Christian worldview. My 40 years of college ministry just validate that perspective. As every year I see more and more of the young people that come in each new year seem further and further away from God, harder and harder to Christian truth, more and more ignorant of anything related to God, and that he's not even relevant. Who even cares? So anyway, I looking for a silver lining in the coronavirus shutdown. I've been thinking about how God has forced the entire nation, every parent out there has forced every parent in America to take a more active role in their children's education. Every single one of us. And dare I say, that's happening all over the world. Every parent now, you can't just say, you're gone for the day and I'm just going to trust what they're doing. Whatever's being taught there in the school is now being taught in your home. You can overhear it. You've got to make sure, you've got to monitor your children. You got to monitor what they're learning, what they're studying, what they're hearing, whether they're doing their lessons. And some of you in one sense, we've all become homeschoolers. And with some people who've said, gee, I could never do that. I think it'd overwhelm me. Some of them are finding out it's pretty overwhelming, and others are finding, gee, it's easier than I thought. And I think I can do this. And so there's a variety of attitudes or a variety of experiences, like shall I say, variety of experiences that we've all had. I will say it's been hard, I'm sure. And I do want to, before I bring on today's guest, I do want to just mention one experience from the Bible that I've often thought about, and that is that the greatest miracle of the Old Testament, other than the creation, was when God delivered the children of Israel from their slavery in Egypt. And God had something big in mind for them. They'd been slaves for 400 years. God had something really big in mind. He was going to deliver them from a way of life they'd become accustomed to as slaves in Egypt. They may not have been happy with it. They may not have liked it, but they were accustomed to it. And God raised up a man named Moses. And he sent Moses down to Pharaoh to say, Moses, let my people go. And when the people heard that Moses was going to do that, they were quite excited. They were excited. Wow, we're going to be free. But that's not what happened immediately. What happened first was Pharaoh said, who is this God of yours? And who do you think you are wanting to be free? You people are lazy. You got to work harder. And now instead of just making bricks, you got to go out and collect the straw yourself. Same amount of bricks, same requirements before, but you got to go get your own materials. And suddenly it became really hard for them, really hard. And they grumbled and they complained and they wanted to kill Moses. But it was part of God's plan, I really believe, because God was preparing them for a place he wanted to take them to. God was going to lead them out of Egypt, where they'd been slaves and been accustomed to living a certain slave life of this dependence upon their masters. He was going to lead them out of there into the promised land, into a new life where they're going to be independent. They're going to have to learn a whole new way of living. And so the first step was it got harder. And I want to say that to you, if you're feeling that things are harder for you now, if things have gotten a lot harder for you, I want to encourage you, keep your chin up, keep your head up, keep your eyes open, keep your faith strong. God just might have something really spectacular that he wants to bring about in your life or your children or your family or even our nation. And so with that, we do want to talk about how do you handle some of the more difficult or harder things, but we want to always remember God is in this. God wasn't surprised by this coronavirus. Before we even had a problem, God had a solution, and he always does. God's always ahead of the game. God always knows how he's going to turn it for the good. We want to keep that positive attitude in all that we do. And but then we want to talk today about some practical things. So I have some guests with me today, and they're all very special to me. They're young mothers. or mothers of young children, shall we say. And there's three of them that I'm going to bring on today. And interestingly, I've known all of them for a while because one of them, Christine Kimball, is our daughter, and she was raised in our home, and they now have three children, Rowan, Aria, and Sienna, or Cece, we call her. And then we have two women who married into our family. We have Allie Short, married my son Dan, and they have three boys. And their boys are Ben, Braden, and Jonah. And then we have Helen Short, who married my son, Tim. And they have a daughter named Nora and two sons, Fisher and Barrick, who was born right just before this coronavirus thing got started. He's not that old, only maybe 2-3 months old now. He was born in January. Helen was raised in her maiden name Stockdale, and her parents, Jack and Joan, Jack was a co-pastor of mine, and we planted the church together in Maryland way back in late 1978. And neither Tim nor Helen were even around then, but they ended up finding one another years later and are married to each other now. So anyway, I'm going to bring them on here. If you, each of them want to go ahead and come on to the Zoom call. All right, let's see. There's Allie. By the way, if you want to see them, you have to either be on YouTube or a Zoom. If you're on Facebook or Instagram, you're only going to hear them. I'm sorry, you have to look at me the whole time. But if you want to see them, go to YouTube and search for Tom the Preacher and enter into the live streaming video now, or come to Zoom, join us at zoom.us. Let me give you the code one more time. You might be more motivated now. The code number 947-7941-7271. And you'd have to enter in the name Tom Live, capital T-O-M, capital L-I-V-E. Okay, so let's see. Let's start with Christine. I already introduced each of you. So there's Christine. Can we hear you? Oh, everyone's muted until I told them to talk. Let's start with Christine. Christine, I'm going to ask each of the girls to give us an attitude that they have felt is important to keep or to have or to develop during this time. And so you can share with us an attitude that you've already had with your children, one that's been tested a little bit more during this time, or one that you realize you've had to develop because you didn't have it before. But share with us, if you would. We'll start with Christine, an attitude that you've been trying to work on with the children during this shutdown time.
Yeah, okay, so the thing that immediately came to mind for me was joy, and that's been on my mind since the beginning of all this. And I remember sharing that actually in our church group. We do like discussion during our virtual service. And I remember sharing that the first week in our prayer requests, just praying that our kids and all the kids in our church would be experiencing joy during this time. So one of the inspirations for that was in Philippians. As soon as all the coronavirus stuff started coming, and there's a lot of worry, and especially as people, not just health, but economically, there's a lot of questions of the future. And I've had heard a lot of people referring to Philippians 4, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your request to God, and all these things. But right before that, it says, rejoice in the Lord always. And I will say it again, rejoice. And so, yeah, just thinking about you having joy during a difficult circumstance. And pretty quickly, I felt like I needed to emphasize that in our house with our kids, because right as stuff was shutting down, our oldest, Rowan, who's 7, she's very perceptive and was picking up on things like we're not going to be able to go to church for a long time. Like, we're not going to be able to do Easter. I'm not going to be able to see my friends, my cousins, all these people.
The grandparents.
The grandparents, yes, just a lot of concerns. And she was crying several times, like the first week, just being really overwhelmed, thinking about everything changing and like not being able to go out to places that we normally go out. So yeah, I mean, my thing that I've been praying and then also trying to emphasize in our house is joy. They're going to remember this time forever. They're probably going to learn about it like in their classes in high school and college. They're going to refer back to this time. And I just really want their memories to be fun memories, to be joyful, to not be filled with, oh yeah, that was that time that mommy and daddy were always watching the news and they were always talking about all like these problems or, just turmoil, like you can think back to a time in your life and either feel memories that feel happy or you can feel anxiety from that, and even our youngest, like 3, even they can pick up on like anxiety in the house or worry. So, I mean, we've done like the first week that we were on the stay-at-home order, the 3 girls had a sleepover in the guest room, like in the same bed for a week. And they stayed up late and they woke up early, but it was really fun, so that was kind of building this foundation. And we've tried to do more, family game nights or movie nights or, going out to metro parks or something, but just things that are fun for them. So that has been the emphasis, and that's come out, and not like we've done that perfectly, for sure. And there's been moments that I've felt stressed and I've like noticed that I've like put that out, but that's one thing that I keep coming back to, and that comes out too. And like just having fun, like dancing around or whatever the thing is. But I think joy, I mean, that's a gift from the Lord to experience,
Good. Very, very good. So you're doing those things. Very, thank you. Helen, let's ask you, what attitude have you thought of? Now a little bit interesting. Helen and Tim live a little bit more out in the country a bit. Got a little bit more space. Whereas Christine Kimball, you're in the city with not a whole lot of extra space. That's so you're talking about going to a park or something. And Dan and Allie, they live in the city too, but right across the street from a nice park. So, or a block away from a park. So Helen, there you've got your little son, Barrick. And go ahead and give us what's something that maybe you have an attitude you wanted to stress, or that you've either been developing or emphasizing.
Yeah. Sorry, I picked him up so that he wouldn't fuss. I feel like this is something that I've been learning as a mom before all of this happened, but it's really become tried a lot more. A lot more opportunity to grow in it, I think. And that's just giving space for each of my kids to learn and grow kind of where they're at. So like a lot of people, I have kids that are different ages or they're in different stages. And my oldest, Nora, is not in the same stage as Fisher, my second one. Their personalities are different. And so I think that like with grief, everybody grieves differently and they need to be given space to do that. I think that this time, this kind of unknown time, people need to be given space to kind of process it differently. This is totally different for us and our husbands, our spouses, but it's also different for our kids. And they are looking to us for cues on what do I do in this kind of unusual time. And my kids don't realize that this is new to me. to them it's just new, but they've experienced lots of new things in life. And that's part of being a kid. For me, like it's maybe different for us as adults. It's different for us as adults than it is for our kids, maybe, because they assume we know, oh, mom and dad have been through this. Mom and dad have an idea. So I think for me, it's been important for me to give myself grace, and to, you know, if I'm having a meltdown moment, or if I'm having a, you know, mom's on the verge of losing it moment, to stop and let myself, you know, stop and try again is like a phrase that we'll say is, you know, would you like to try again? And just like I want my kids to try again, or kind of reset their attitudes if they're having a hard time, I want to exercise that myself. And something that I think kind of throughout all of my mom experience that I've wanted to do is be an example to my kids of being a parent that is growing forward. And as I'm not, you know, doing everything perfectly or the way I think I should, to give myself grace, and, you know, being humble when I need to say, hey, I was wrong. I was, you know, mom got angry, or mom, you know, I didn't understand the situation and I assumed something, or whatever the circumstance might be, giving like space for that. I don't know if that.
Well, it's interesting you use this term space, because, you know, Roz and I attended a marriage conference. It was February 28th, 29th, March 1st, right before all this was kind of breaking out, because I remember in the hotel, I kept putting hand sanitizer on my hands. So it was happening, but we hadn't had any shutdown yet. And one of I think the big thing I remember from that conference was they talked about the need to give one another space. And I don't know, to be honest, I didn't, Roz is sitting right, I'm looking at her as well. But I don't know that I felt a great need for her to give me space, or me to give her space during that conference. But I almost say it's a little bit prophetic, because now a couple weeks later, you know, our schedules have been changed so that we're both in the home 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, day after day after day, week after week after week. And I think that is something to realize, that sometimes with our kids or with our spouse, sometimes they just need a little bit of space. It doesn't mean they don't love you or you don't love them. It's just there's been kind of an invasion of that, and it is it's sometimes we just need a little space. Allie, you have 3 children, and two of your children go to a Christian school, mm-hmm. And one is your toddler home that that still is in training. And so this has been a change, because your school's been videoing in, I believe, and lessons. And I guess it started originally with like quite a lengthy day of video, and it's changed. But what's one attitude that, well, tell us a little bit about your experience here, and then give us an attitude.
Yeah, I'd say of the 3 of us sisters, I feel like my day-to-day has changed a lot more. I used to only have one rascal to wrangle. And if you listen closely, you might hear him screaming, rejecting his nap time right now. But I definitely was used to sending the older 2 and having just my time to be with the 2.5-year-old, and we do our day and we get things done. And then very abruptly, I had many more hats to wear. You know, not only did I still have to do, thankfully, I get to stay home with them, and I'm not juggling a job on top of it. And seriously, the whole time I've been doing this homeschooling during the quarantine, I've just been in awe of the parents who are also juggling a job and have those expectations on their shoulders. But I put on the teacher's hat and IT hat, because I had to figure out all the computer stuff, logins and passwords and all kinds of that stuff, as well as still figure out how to grocery shop, how to, you know, how to clean the house so I didn't lose my mind, how to do all those extra things that I was already doing, but now I'm a full-time teacher as well. And it was really hard. The first week was a lot of troubleshooting on the school's end and on the parents' end. But it was really hard at first trying to figure out what an appropriate workload was. They've really scaled back in their expectations for what the kids are supposed to be doing at home, which has been really helpful. But I think the first couple of days, it took us like 5 or 6 hours to get through the school day. And it was a lot. And I think I spent the first couple of days yelling more than teaching. So it was not my best moments, but we've really found a really good a groove. We've settled in. And I love that you talk about attitude being the most important thing, because it's something that obviously I've had to work on myself, my attitude, and it kind of sets the tone for the home and how that's all going to work as we're all home together 24/7. But also it's a good opportunity for us to work on our kids' attitudes. And well, I love what Christine said about joy. That's definitely something that we strive for, is just to have like a positive start to the day. And whether that means I get up early and have my devotions and get my brain ready to interact with kids and my spirit ready for that, or we listen to worship music, or whatever it is, whatever we need to fill up so that we can pour out to our kids. I think that's really important, to have that spirit of joy in the house. But also just, it's really easy, I think, for the kids to just, things are new and things are different, and they can just have a complaining spirit. And it's been really good to work. The first couple of weeks were rocky as we reinforced some what am I trying to say? Things that we already were trying to do in our home and with our family. Like we try to have, spirits that will obey quickly, obedient, or quickly, completely, and cheerfully. And we learned that from the Gordons, of course, but it was really hard to be on top of that in the busy school year when we're just trying to get them to school on time and pick them up and do all of the things that overwhelm us during the busy school year. Now we have all the time in the world to really hone in on some of those attitudes and the way we want to interact with each other, how we treat our brothers, how we respond to mom and dad when we're having a hard time or when we're frustrated. So it's been a really cool opportunity to not be distracted by all the busyness of life and just focus on what our standards are for our kids and their attitudes and our attitudes as parents and all of that. It's just been a really good opportunity to work on that. So that's been good.
I think, you said a couple of things I want to comment on. First of all, when the school day started originally, it was like, 5 hours a day of classroom time?
Almost 7. Yeah. Well,
almost 7 hours a day.
Yeah.
And now what's it down to?
Well, I try to start at 9 and we're usually done before lunch. So about 3.
I think that's one of the big things about the homeschool model that people don't realize. And that is that you can do in homeschool in 2 to 3 hours a day what in the regular school might take 6 or 7 hours. Why is that? Well, it's because you're dealing with such a small class, and everything from bathroom breaks to recess to lunchtime to all the stuff. It's just like if you're driving on a trip. If you've got a whole busload of people and you take a bathroom break, it's going to take you 45 minutes. If it's just you're alone in the car by yourself, you can get in and out and you're back on the road. It's that's multiplied over. So the homeschool model, it doesn't require someone to spend 6-7 hours a day instructing their child in the same way that you would in the classroom, a full day's worth of work. And lots of times, let's be honest, lots of times the time management principle is the amount of work you have will expand or contract compared to the amount of time you have. If you've got to get such and such a lesson done, you've got 1 hour, you'll get it done in 1 hour. If you got 2 hours to do that same lesson, you'll probably take 2 hours. It's just the way time manages. So it does. So this whole thing, it's not like with your kids while they're home with you here, you've got to feel like you've got them in school 7 hours a day. I would advise that's just going to be really, really hard to do. And have your day be where there's part-time instruction, but you've got more time where there's other things, get out, run around, do things, go to the park, play in the backyard, and all that's fine. Your kids aren't falling behind if you do that. Mm-hmm. Second thing, as we're talking about attitudes, that I think is really, really important. I remember, back when our kids were young and I'd come home and Roz was always so tired and it'd be easy to think, well, what's so hard about what you're doing? And people say, well, you're wiping runny noses and changing diapers all day long. And I'd say, well, still, that's not all that hard or time consuming. But what's going on with educating and training your children is it's a battle of wills. And every child has a will. Every child has their desires, many of which they need to be brought into subjection. And that is hard work. That is exhausting work to, this little child, why won't they just do what you tell them? And why do they resent? And why do they react? And why are they stubborn? And all these things. Well, the job of parenting is training a child's will, bending their will without breaking their spirit. And that takes great wisdom, and it is exhausting work. And so that's why being prepared for each day and not having the attitude of this is going to be easy, but this is a challenging day. What I'm going to do today is be challenging. I need God's strength. I need God's wisdom. I need God's grace. And I need to come into this like I'm an athlete. I need to come into like this is going to be a big game. Today with my kids, it's going to be like I better be prepared for a big game because each day is an important day. And I've got to win on this one. I want to win. And the challenge is, can my authority as a parent prevail over their self-will and stubbornness and rebellion and independence and sinfulness and so forth. So good. Well, how about each one of you, if we have one practical suggestion? I know we've already gotten some, but if you've got something practical that has helped you through this time and this time of change. In my email last night, I listed a few ideas relating to scheduling or how to start the day or what, mine were somewhat general. If you have any ideas that are from that list or something else, who'd like to go first?
I can go first.
Okay, Christine.
So when I was thinking about, when you asked me this question earlier, the practical suggestion, mine probably doesn't work for everybody, because for me, the practical suggestion is to be flexible. But for others, that might drive them nuts. So I would just say, know what works for you and what works for your kids. So some of my friends, and Allie will probably, she might say the opposite, that she needs the schedule. And she thrives on that. And she's so good at that. And I'm guessing the family thrives on that. Kimball and I don't, and our household doesn't thrive on having every block scheduled. And I've tried that a bunch of times, and it leads to frustration on my end or on the kids. And so I've just kind of learned, okay, I can have goals for each day, and even things scheduled, we're doing this at this time, but to hold some of those plans loosely. And it takes a lot of the pressure for me, because I can get stressed, or I find for me, the times that I struggle with getting frustrated with the kids is when I'm trying really hard to stick to a schedule. And when I'm more laid back, then it's a lot easier for me to just be filled with joy and even to enjoy coming back to teaching enjoy teaching a lot more and have fun, like sitting down with them and working on that. And then also to release the pressure when they're having a great time just playing together. So, you know, for instance, this morning, I had in mind before they woke up, okay, we're going to start school at this time and we're going to do it from here to here and then practice piano from this time to this time. And then, but you know, they woke up and the girls just immediately were playing amazingly together. They had this whole plan of what they wanted to do. They set up a spot. They spent 2 hours setting up a spa for themselves. They were playing great. And that fits with one of my goals for this time of the kids having fun. And another goal, I don't know if I mentioned this, but this is just a life goal I have and something we pray every day for the kids. And we talk to them about that. I want them to be best friends for life, not just sisters, but best friends. And so any opportunity I have to encourage that, I want to do that. And then, you know, they did that for a couple hours and then we did school and it was okay to push that back. And so for me, yeah, big practical thing is to be flexible. And I say that knowing it doesn't work for everybody. And also the age of my kids, 3, 5, and 7, the 3 and 5-year-old aren't doing school. 5-year-old I do school with sometimes, but she'll still be in pre-K next year. So, and then the 7-year-old, it's really like you were saying, Dad, it's easy to fit that in. We do, you know, 2 hours of school a day. We've got the whole day to do that. So, yeah, I mean, just letting your kids explore their creativity. I love it when they come up with things that, you know, in school, teachers will give these assignments on how to be creative. And when I give them the time and space, they do it on their own, and maybe make a huge mess doing it. but anyways, yeah, I think that's I would boil down my practical advice of being flexible. Yeah, not getting stressed if things veer off track.
Yeah. So flexibility presupposes somewhat of a schedule, but a schedule that if it's not kept to, you know, the key of flexibility, I think, is keeping in mind, like you said, what are your bigger goals?
Yeah.
Is it more important to get this particular chore done right today or this lesson? Or like you said, your girls are going to be best friends for life and this was a chance for that. And so I think that flexibility, lots of times you keep, what are our really bigger goals that need to be achieved, and the things that would stress me out sometimes that they're not happening right now, are they really that important anyway? And so very good. Flexibility. Well, and like you said, that presupposes a schedule, but I'm with you on that one. Helen, do you have any practical thing you'd like to share with us that you've that has been helping you adjust to all this time? Got to unmute.
Yeah. I'm going to try to do it without him crying here.
Okay.
A practical thing for me and for Tim has been making it a point to make sure that we get time on our own, just kind of for ourselves to kind of decompress, process things, just be by ourselves. Last weekend, I realized that being a mom to another little newbie, it's not uncommon for me to be with people, literally be with people 100% of the time. I, you know, sleep next to Tim, wake up in the morning, I am with my kids all day, every day. And it's really, really fun and they're really, really sweet, but it's also really important for me to be able to get time by myself. And whether that's a time when Tim and I coordinate where I can go for a walk by myself, or sometimes once a week during this quarantine. Tom, you had mentioned we live a little bit farther out than Christine and Allie. So we're already kind of naturally more quarantined than most people. But he will go and like get takeout. He'll put our 2 older kids in the car while this guy's taking a nap or something. He'll go get takeout, and I have 20 minutes to myself, which maybe before the quarantine didn't seem like very much, but right now it seems great. So, but I think, and then also for him, it's similar, whether it's getting time to just go outside and do yard work by yourself, or go be in a room by yourself, or read, or, you know, spend some time before the kids get up or after the kids go to bed where you're just caring for yourself. That's hugely important. And that's important whether you're in a pandemic situation or just general life. That's really important for me. A really important thing for me to teach my children. So I actually have, my kids are still young. My oldest is 5, so, or almost 5. So I still require quiet times or rest times where they don't have to sleep, but they do need to spend time by themselves every day. So it's just like a nice opportunity to step back and take a breath. A lot of times, especially if whoever it is having a rough day, it's an opportunity to kind of reset and just kind of let your heart kind of be quiet. There's a lot of things going on, and there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of anxiety. And kids pick up on that. And so it's really helpful for them as well to just have time for quiet time where they kind of get used to being with themselves and not just being entertained by something, but just kind of spending quiet time alone with themselves. So that's been helpful for us.
Good. So being able to be your best and have your best and give you your best. Very good. Allie, do you have a practical, let's see, we will unmute you. Do you have a practical suggestion yourself?
Yeah, as Christine alluded, I'm opposite her in how we do things. Although, Christine, you would be shocked at how flexible I've been during quarantine. I've been surprising myself at how I've been able to go with the flow sometimes when it's not written on my schedule the way, or it's not playing out the way my schedule says it should. But I think that's cool. At the same time, knowing my family, well, I'll just give a background. I worked at a friend's daycare, actually Helen did too, at a friend's daycare for 6 years. And I learned from them amazing skills about scheduling and moving kids from activity to activity in a way that they can predict, because I think especially young kids, this works great for my toddler. He is at his best when he kind of can predict what the day is going to look like and what's coming next. I think a lot of kids respond to it in a way that makes them feel safe. The environment is predictable. And my older two, they grew up coming with me to the daycare, so they were used to that. And then, of course, they're in school where it's very regimented in what the day looks like. So when we come home, even in the summertime, I love for the first week of summer to make a schedule for the summer, which sounds insane to some people. But it makes me feel like I have a little bit of control. And what I found is, especially my little middle, who love him, but most people know he gives me the most, he's the most strong-willed and hard-headed, but he's also so much like me in the fact that he needs to know the schedule. He needs to know what's coming next. He functions so much better when there's a plan. I think the first thing he says in the morning is, what are we going to do today? And it's annoying a lot, but at the same time, I get it because I'm that way too. Like before all this quarantine thing, I think the last thing I would do before I went to sleep was check my calendar for the next day and, just kind of go through what's coming and I love feeling prepared. So I know that at least 2 out of the 3 of my kids really thrive with a schedule. So because of that, and thankfully the oldest he's just easygoing, love him. He's just, and so it's, even though he doesn't exactly need the schedule of moving from thing to thing in a predictable way. The other two do. The two slightly more difficult ones do. So we do that. And I think that it's been really helpful for this quarantine time to, just to have things go a certain way. But also just something that Helen said earlier when we were talking about on our first round of answers, when she said just knowing each kid and what they need. It's been really cool because I feel like during this quarantine time, my oldest, I've found out that he is a social introvert, which is interesting because my middle is a shy extrovert. So that means like Ben, my oldest, loves to be with people and interact. He's not scared. He makes friends really easily, but he could be in his room by himself reading books and playing Legos all day and be really filled up by that. So I kind of let him do that whenever our schedule allows. Braden, our middle, he would not say more than 2 words to you in public if he didn't know you well, even if he does know you, but he needs to be with somebody all day long. So it's been really interesting trying to fill those kids up in their specific way that they need it, so that they function better for the rest of the day. I can tell when Ben's a little burned out from having to play with his brothers all day. So I'll just send him away to go do what he needs to do. And Braden acts up the most when I'm trying to get him away from me. So I will die to self, even though I needed that time by myself, and we'll spend time together. And then all of a sudden he's obeying again. And, so those are practical things that, that I would offer.
Very good. Very good. Okay. Any final word from anyone? Otherwise, go ahead, Christine.
I was just going to say, all 3 of us have younger kids. Allie's oldest is in 2nd grade and mine's in 1st grade. So a lot of our perspective, I think, is from how we are adjusting to the change, which like Allie said at the beginning, hasn't been quite as drastic of a change for Helen and I, because I was already homeschooling. Helen was home with her kids. Has been a change for sure. But I think just, the older the kids are, the more emotional the time is going to be. And so, some of the people watching might have kids that are in 5th grade or middle school. And I'm just thinking putting myself, thinking of me as a middle schooler and having this go on. I think there's a lot more fear or anxiety that your child might be feeling. I'm surprised even what Rowan expresses as a 7-year-old. And so I think as a parent, it's so important during this time to not write off your kids' feelings, and to, be asking them how they're feeling and listening to them, and not just, if they're having a hard time, just be like, oh, it's going to be fine, and just move on. And obviously appropriate towards, each kid's age. But to have those conversations, and, we try and have open dialogue throughout the day, spiritual conversations, or bringing things to the Lord, bringing scripture into things. But obviously, when your kid, the older they are, I'm sure what they're going through is huge, and the isolation they're feeling from their friends, the uncertainty of what's happening next year is a big deal for them. Yeah. So, like Helen said, my kids probably don't even realize what's going on if we didn't say anything. So, the younger kids, it's a different set of things that are being adjusted to.
Yeah, you're right. And this has been younger people, younger moms with younger kids. And so sorry, as I put this together, last minute, I just called upon people in my own family, and I don't have anyone who's raising teenagers yet. Maybe we'll do one of those later this week or something. You mentioned having good conversation, and it just reminds me how important it is to have times together, like in regular life, it's important that I feel one of the best things we did with our family was have meals together. We would have dinner together regularly and often breakfast together. And just that time sitting together around the tables when so much good conversation occurred. And you want to make sure that you're still having that. Being in the home all the time together, you might have the feeling we're always talking to one another. We don't need to sit down and have a meal together. And maybe you do, maybe you don't. But you want to make sure that you're having undistracted time for conversation, interaction, without other things distracting you, TV or things of that nature. Well, okay, thank you so much. You know, just as I'm reminded, I think the big thing I want to say is parents, it's your responsibility, the raising of your children. And this is reminding us, it's not the government's responsibility. It's not the teachers, the churches. Others can contribute, but ultimately you want to remember it's your responsibility raising your kids. And this whole shutdown is putting that on us and reminding us of that in ways that we may not have thought a lot about. And so I want to encourage you that God says it's your responsibility. And I think this is a silver lining to be involved more with our kids, not less, to be really, really careful about, you know, I think one of the gals was sharing how our kids can get stressed out too. Well, you might get stressed out, but parents, never forget, you've got to be the one that sets the tone in the house. If your kids are stressed out, screaming, yelling, all that, maybe you ought to ask if you've been stressed out, screaming, and so on. And the answer might not be so much to tell them to straighten up as to make sure you get your own spirit in a place of rest and trust. Do what you need, whether you need some space, go for a walk, pray to the Lord, memorize some verses. But attitude is everything. If you have the attitude of this is terrible and you're filled with fear and you're anxious and you're stressed and you don't bring your own attitudes towards the Lord and believe that he's going to give you that rest of your soul, that'll show up in your kids, and your house is going to be a very, very, very unpleasant and stressful place to be. So parents, it begins with you. Make sure you're doing with God. Make sure you're spending time with God. Make sure you're in prayer and in the word, in God's promises. It begins with you. The spirit in your attitude, the spirit in the house begins with you, and it'll flow into your children. And this time can be this can be a great time in your family, or it can be a World War III in your family. We don't want it to be the latter. We want it to be the great time. So I want to thank Allie and Christine and Helen for what you've contributed and added. And I hope that this has been helpful to anyone who has been involved today. And God bless you. And we will be back tomorrow, Tom Live at 2:00. If you don't get my daily email, I encourage you to get it, because I do write on things that can help you and encourage you. Last night I wrote on this topic and I gave a lot of tips of my own that I think can be helpful in your home at this time. But this show today was to try and get some additional ideas. But you can get that on my website, tomthepreacher.com. And you just scroll down, enter in your email address where it says keep in touch with Tom, and you'll get my daily email beginning tonight. So God bless each one of you. Thanks again. And we will see you tomorrow at 2:00 when we have another edition of Tom Live then. So God bless you on Facebook, on Instagram, YouTube, and Zoom. You have a blessed day, and we'll see you tomorrow. God bless you.